Today is Monday, March 29th, and this video is not going to be as long as the one on Saturday morning. But the bears took charge again. We didn't hit the midline on the McClellan oscillator on Friday, and the bears really took it to us today. A lot of it had to do with the hedge fund out of Asia that had a $20 billion margin call against them. Of course, they couldn't come up with the $20 billion. So today they had to sell, and Sunday in China, they had to sell a ton of stock. So really, it could have been much worse than it was because the Dow still ended up 100 points. The NASDAQ and the S&P 500, look at that, not very much, almost flat, and the NASDAQ only down 0.6%, but the decliners led advancers by 3-1, which is the opposite of Friday. Now, is the selling over yet? Even the volume wasn't all that particularly high. So if this hedge fund was selling so they could meet their margin requirements, the rest of the market must have been sitting back and just watching to see what happened. Look at the financials were red. Communications, Google, Facebook, Amazon, consumer defense were green, healthcare were green. So now let's look at the charts, because the McClellan oscillator tells us now that really the bears seem to be in charge. And this is the pattern that we were looking at one time. It had come down to the midpoint, bounced back up, and then went down into the oversold. We didn't quite see the same here, but we are running the risk of this happening again, where the bears maintain control for about a month and a half. And what happened with the market in that meantime, if you were to draw a trend line down here, you'd see negative. And when the bears had control here, we only saw flattening of the composite index. The composite index is still rising, but the bears have taken control. Now, why is that? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And that must be the optimism that people see for April, the latter part of April and May. So let's take a look at the key markets. Now, the Dow Jones did hit a new high today, I was told. Let's take a look at the chart. Come on. So let's move to the next one. The NASDAQ, just below the 161.8, where we had a green line. We'll take that green line out now. The Chiku span really never got to the 50, and price never got to the cloud. But this is not a bad day for the NASDAQ, given what could have been. Can we get the Dow now? No. So let's go to the S&P. And the S&P didn't make a new high, but it did make a double top, triple top. One, two, three, four. 4 times in the same point. Now, that close together, we don't call them a triple top. But it does look like it's trying to break that, and it should, because we do have the Chiku span above the candles. So the S&P looks ready to pop. Can we get the Dow Jones now? No, and I'm not going to keep you. There we go. So the Dow Jones made a new high and is now on its way, having broken 127.2, is now on its way to 34,000. Wow. So let's look at the volatility index, which only ticked up a little bit, but still is in this comfort zone that we've been tracking for a long time, which is really good for the market. And we've certainly, that's quite the inflection point in the market. Now let's look at BLDR, which we brought back to our radar because of these 2 big days, Thursday and Friday. It had a pullback today. Alibaba had a nice $4.60 day today. So GT, GR, GW in the comments. Good trade, nice bounce off the 50%. MP, I think we can forget about this stock. Don't know why it's not popular. You know what it does. We've talked about it. Where was today's low? Not Chiku span, not on the 50. So the chances are that we could be down here tomorrow. Now why? Because the Chiku span would have an opportunity to test the top of the cloud and the 50 all at the same time. And as we have said many times before, coincidences don't happen. They just beg for attention. So that coincidence is like a big magnet. Look for that tomorrow. ALEC, I bought another 100 shares of ALEC today. Nice little pop. And you see this resistance on the 200, simple moving average. Bounce off the 200, but look at where the Chiku span is. The Chiku span is stuck. There's so much resistance in here. It's going to be tough. And we might see ALEC just doing this, but I'm hoping that it does that in the future because I like the stock, but it's going to depend on some clinical news. Apple up 14 cents, really nothing technically to look at. Abbott, I'm still thinking it's going through this low resistance cloud, but look where we had the Chiku span end up today. Support right on the top of this candle and the cloud. Again, this is another coincidence or an area where two things are coinciding, and that's the top of the candle and the cloud. Just too much of an attraction, and the Chiku span found its end there today right here, right below the cloud. But Abbott should move up. IBM, I continue to add there, added 150 shares Thursday or Friday. Home Depot was down, JP Morgan, the banks were down. Because there were two Japanese banks that were highly leveraged to this Nomura and somebody else, I don't know, who wasn't a Japanese bank. Maybe it was Goldman Sachs. We could look at the Goldman Sachs chart, but you can do that on your own. I mean, somebody provided the margin to this hedge fund, and they are hoping they get their money back. NIO, not bad, and below the 200. The Chiku span is still back here. Did it get didn't get to the 200 today. Still good stock, but I suspect if it's a hedge fund with heavy investments in China, for sure it had some of the EV stocks, if not all of the EV stocks. We could look at all of the Chinese EV stocks and take a look and see, but this is pretty positive for NIO to have ended the day that way. Now Plug down 9%, but thank goodness it did get support on the 200. So tomorrow we should expect a bounce. I am so far in the red on Plug. It's just a play that I think, based on fundamentals, I like the stock. Based on technicals, I don't really, but I'm sure glad to see that bounce off of the 200. There's just not enough volatility in the options to do any covered calls there, so I'm pretty naked on Plug. And Square had another horrible day today with a lower low from yesterday, but not as low as Thursday, so could have been worse. The low today, let's see where the Chiku span was. The low today was, well, the Chiku span had nothing to do with anything within the cloud. It's just still playing in the cloud. So that's it for today. The banks were down. AT&T, beautiful stock. Love the dividend. Love the security of that stock. It's paying a dividend, as is US Bank, on April the 15th. And I will reinvest in AT&T, and I'll take the US Bank dividend and probably buy more Abbott.